What's going on, YouTube? I know it seemed like the world is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, ain't it? And it's a lot to discuss, so I kind of want to jump to it, skip all of the formalities, but salute to all my brothers and sisters who has taken the opportunity and the time to check this out because this is well needed. Now, first, I wanted to address some of the things that were said in the video that I first uploaded, which, I named a couple of people, and then I didn't want anybody to get the impression that I'm making light of this. This is a huge responsibility that we take up for those who take up the responsibility of informing the Black community. This is huge. You don't take your responsibility lightly. You just don't. And one of the things that I noticed, and I don't know whether or not this is what is influencing individuals, but I do know that when you do your homework, you realize that it can be a powerful tool in influencing and steering public opinion. And what is that? That is when we are not fully aware of not just the terms that are given in the information by a lot of these brothers and sisters, even their titles bear, we tend to turn off our filters and give them more credit than what they actually deserve because we take it for face value and don't realize that they're giving us surface level information. All right. So when you have a person by the name, and so let me fully explain myself. So let's look at the names and how their names can cause Black people, like I said, to turn their filters off. All right. So when you run around with the term doctor, all right, in front of your name, like Dr. Wesley Muhammad. One of the things that happens is, okay, what is a doctorate? A doctorate is post-bachelor's. You go to school at the collegiate level for an additional 4 years after obviously obtaining your bachelor's. So you stay an additional 4 years and that's your doctorate. And theoretically, they say if you have your master's, you should probably get it in 3 years. Okay, so with that being said, we understand that the doctorate level, so you can have a physician that has their doctorate. All right, and you can have a professor that has their doctorate. Both has the same level of education, but it is the occupation that is different. All right, that's what we have to understand. And so what I'm saying is when you hear the term doctor, usually you conflate that with health because of how things have been pumped to us living in this country. You turn on any TV show or you watch any movie that has anything that has a character who is played by a doctor in it. We when we hear that doctor, when we hear that term, we more than likely associate it with health. And this is a slick way to be deceptive, and they know that. It's a slick way to be deceptive because when you look him up, I'm not saying that he doesn't have his doctorate, but what it tells about the man is that he has his master's degree in Islamic studies. So and then with the information that he presented, it just goes to show he didn't do his research well enough. All right, I recommended to y'all in the first video that you take a look at the video presented by Janice or the Vegetarian Society in Hawaii, and they had a guest by the name of Janice Stanger, who I believe is a professor from the University of California, and she was talking about the myth of proteins. Not just what the argument from Dr. Inky when he suggested that it was the foreign proteins, right? The foreign proteins that was the big thing because he didn't even want to center on the fact that 86% of over 80% of African Americans are lactose intolerant. He would suggest that that might be the counter argument for Dr. Wesley Muhammad. So he said, let me steer on foreign proteins, which could aggravate the immune system and cause an inflammation. All right. And then that is a credible argument. But then, like I told you before, if you go even deeper, then you have to establish the relevancy of the argument that is held by the establishment that we need as much protein as we need. Because what do they state? It's like she talked about. She said that protein, we don't burn it in the amounts that we obviously use our primary fuel, which is glucose. All right, we don't burn it at that level. So what complicates the issue is that there's 4 constituents of this molecule: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. All right, the carbon and the hydrogen and the oxygen, we already know we could do something with. We've been saying this over and over again, but we're going to commit it to memory. That can be turned into carbon dioxide or carbohydrates and, energy and water. But the nitrogen is the problem. The nitrogen it puts a tremendous amount of stress on the liver and the kidneys. Okay, so the nitrogen goes to the liver and is turned into ammonia. And then from ammonia, it's turned into urea and then into urine and then it's excreted from the body. All right. So with excess protein comes this tremendous amount of pressure to, for the body to achieve balance. All right. So it's not only that, it's like this man has to understand that this animal has been domesticated for over 10,000 years, even to get to that state, to be able to produce as much milk as it is, and as much meat. You understand? Because the cattle that was over in Asia did not look like the cow that you see presently. All right, it's been domesticated by man. Him specifically, in order to acquire the vitamin D, because not being able to stay out in the sun for long periods of time. You must know that. You are a being that is carbon based, that is super conductive. All right. So we already established that what? The keratin has this melanin dust in it that they call it. All right. And melanin allows the carbon-based beam to absorb 99.9% of the UV rays that come from the electromagnetic spectrum. So why do we need liquid sun when we're the sun people? That's ignorant to me. You see, not to mention that we don't even control the means of production when it comes to the cow. All right. Most of those cows are in what? CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFO. So at least, you think this brother would have the decency to tell brothers and sisters that, oh, well, if this is a staple, or should be, or considered a staple of the American diet, which it already is, but I'm saying the staple of African Americans' diet, which unfortunately it already is, but it shouldn't be promoted. This is what I'm saying. Don't reinforce those old ideals which hamper or prevent the black people from looking at these things in terms of agents of biological and chemical warfare. That their diet has been purposely changed to stagnate maximal development. That's what needs to be known. These are the characters that I feel like a person must call out, because it's just too much deception. Even when people, man, I remember, when I was living in Atlanta, and I was the little access channels that they had down there. You would hear Dick Gregory on there. I'm talking about Spit Fireball. This dude is angry. He talking about white folks like ain't no tomorrow, and yet, the rhetoric made it appear as if the man had always been like this historically. So, to my surprise, when I opened up a book called Black Against the Empire, a book written or released in around 2013, and it had documented the activity of the Black Panthers here in the United States, right? And I'm just shocked when around I think between pages 50 and 75, somewhere in there. Just so if you end up reading the book, that's where you should. That's where you'd be able to find it at. And it had stated that there was some like riot-like conditions taking place in San Diego, right? Now, he's from San Diego. Okay, riot-like conditions taking place in San Diego, and the Panthers are in the center of it, the middle of it, right? So the San Diego Police Department, in order to call, because mind you, before he was an activist, he was a comedian and an actor. All right, we fail to realize we have a hard time identifying the boule, because it's hard when we're looking at people with our skin tone and we automatically get lost in the sauce. You see, but let me go back to the point. The point being is that when they needed that situation to be calmed down, guess who the police department ended up calling? Yes, Dick Gregory. All right. And then guess what ended up happening? They ended up shooting the nigga in the leg. So that's what really took me. I was like, oh, well, okay. They must really didn't like what this nigga was coming to say. But now he was Spitfire. Maybe he changed it up, but I really didn't totally believe that when he was asked by someone who was interviewing him. They said that they asked him, they said, what did you think about Huey P? And he was like, psh. And it, it didn't, you could tell. I mean, he already always has his face already always be scrunched up, but he was real upset. He was like, oh man, that nigga, he's a traitor to his people. He was selling crack to his people. I was like, this nigga's so upset, he's switching up decades. Crack didn't come about to the 80s. So the height of the Panthers party was in 71, 72. After that, they were being dismantled by the institution. So those are the things that I'm talking about. Like, we have to really investigate the individuals who are presented to us as our heroes, as our leaders, as the people who will illuminate us or get us to a higher level of awareness or achieve that upward mobility in society that they say that they desperately want for us, which is a falsehood. So, when you take people even like MLK, MLK, his dad, changed their name. His name was Michael King. Okay, and his dad ended up changing his name to Martin Luther King Jr., his son's name. Okay, who is the name of a guy who was the head or started the Protestant church by the name of Martin Luther. So even in the subtleties, mind you, it's all about symbols being relayed to us. Even in that subtlety, that strong subtlety, is suggesting to you that this black man is suggesting to you that he can take the name of a German man and free the American Indian mind or African mind, whichever ideology you find yourself, or whichever paradigm you find yourself under, and we're all in this collectively. So both. I do have a strong feeling too that that we've been here. So a lot of times I can't submit to this idea of being snatched up in boats and brought here. They were at war with us since they got here. We are the living remnants of the people who had the heart to fight for their country and the land that they were in. And I'll prove that to you a little bit later on with just a little bit of information. But the point being is that when you have people like that assume that they can take on a European mindset to free us, and I'm talking about long term success. It'll never really happen. So when we take a look at his people who were proved to be indispensable to his movement, like Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was he the one who organized the March on Washington. All right, Bayard Rustin was his right hand man, and Bayard Rustin was caught having sex with two white men outside. All right, in 1952 or 54, one of those days, outside he was caught, but still was able to organize the March on Washington. See, and when Malcolm X and all of them who already knew this man's makeup, they threatened to spill the beans on what Martin and him staying in the same hotel room as a man like that who got such a aggressive form of sexuality. And so he wanted to distance himself to ensure that he didn't compromise his position in the black community, considering the fact that over 60% of our households, there was a man and a woman in that household. Which just goes to show you the power of them being able to reconstruct our image that's suitable to fit their agenda. Because, and think about it, you can't have a nonviolent movement unless the people are nonviolent. It just doesn't happen. It's not like you're going to go into the hood right now and start smacking a couple brothers up in the head, upside the head, as a collective force without some measures being taken. There can be no Ku Klux Klan to just be riding in black neighborhoods nowadays. The mindset is totally different. But it could happen back then because, for one, there were families, and a man, before he takes any or makes any major decisions, he has to think about his family. And, and two, that's not the type of character that they wanted us to have at that time. You understand what I'm saying? So, what they needed was they needed someone who could create a movement that was nonviolent, based off nonviolence and civil disobedience. Because you had other brothers like Robert F. Williams. Robert F. Williams, he started his own NAACP chapter in Monroe, North Carolina. All right, and he had the book that was that was infamous to them, was called Negroes with Guns. All right, and it proved to be one of the strongest intellectual forces for Huey P. Newton, which gave him that excitement that he needed in order to go do what he needed to do. Okay, and he was someone who the establishment was really wanted to put 6 feet under. I'm telling you. And they used Martin Luther King's power to counter him and Malcolm X simultaneously. But the real person who they were watching was Robert Williams, because Robert Williams was telling black people to get armed. He had military experience. All right, he had military experience, and I think was discharged from the Marines. I think they said dishonestly discharged or something like that, something weird like that. You gotta look it up. But after that, he realized that the blacks needed to be armed. He said something like, when the white man get a gun, you get the grenade. When he gets the grenade, you get the bomb. He's like, you the one who got to step it up a notch. That's what his mentality was. That rhetoric was even more vicious to them than what Malcolm X was even spitting. You see, and at one point in time, he stood up, he opened fire on the Ku Klux Klan when they invaded his community, and it was a situation where in 1958 it was a case called the kissing case, where some white girl kissed the black boy on the cheek. That the parents of the white girl came into our towns and wanted to kill the parents. All right, wanted to kill the parents. And I'm gonna go a little further. So you know, you had individuals who where things were going on, and black men were trying to be men, and you had agents who were making that an impossibility at a very critical time. But they had the establishment behind them. You know, these actors, these boule niggas, like, look, you know, they do it and they take our culture because our culture is so powerful. They know that that's the only tool that they will have in order to successfully polarize us. Because we get our culture so powerful, we're usually caught up in it as it comes to us. And it's only through retrospect, or it's only through, you know, hindsight that we're able to a retrospective thinking, or through hindsight that we're able to look back and say, oh man, how did I get caught up into that? Our culture is that powerful. It catches up the whole world. How it's not going to affect you. So when you have an NWA and Ice Cube and these niggas yelling F the police coming out of nowhere, no radio play, going platinum. You understand what I'm saying? But then play police officers in all their movies. You got to know that you have been had. That's what I'm talking about. So, you know, like I said, when you have an individual who, you know, we're going back all the way to the beginning, Dr. Wesley Muhammad, and he suggests that this is liquid gold, and we already established that we're carbon-based beings who are able to translate solar energy into usable energy for the biological agent. Then that has, we don't even, that doesn't apply to us. We're not animals. We're not in the animal category. I told you, through the process of photosynthesis, plants are in the two categories of life organisms has to do with, and I'm talking about just the two most fundamental categories, which would be plants and animals. They are different because plants can do what? They can take the sun's energy and create all the amino acids. All right, all 20 of them. And then mind you, like she said, like there was talked about, and like we should already know, it should be common knowledge that all plants, all animals, and all man require all 20 amino acids. All right, so you have 11 that is non-essential and 9 that is essential. And 11 doesn't mean that it's not important, it just means that your body manufactures them. And the other 9 is essential because you have to acquire it from the diet. But all plants contain all 20. Okay, so this idea that you have to complement meals in order to create a full protein, that's garbage. And this is what we talking about. So they're still peddling myths. But since you're not a real doctor of health, you don't know that. And I'm talking about a holistic doctor. We're not talking about a medical doctor, because they're not well versed in nutrition. And I gotta listen for my son. He's asleep. They're not well versed in nutrition, and you know, we would be doing ourselves a huge disservice to even be listening to them. But the point being is that all of these individuals who, you know, even when I was taking a listen to Sinetta TV, I mean, a lot of this stuff just be comical. I believe he was debating some Hebrew Israelite or something, you know, and in the Hebrew is they were talking about some passage in the Bible about Peter, somebody kissing Jesus, or somebody kissing John, something had to deal with that. And obviously what he wanted the guy to admit was, is this homosexual behavior? So we know what he was trying to garner from that. But my thing is that, you know, the argument that he had, and still, like I said, we can waste a lot of time in areas that we shouldn't even be focusing in on, especially if you don't understand how that information is structured. All right. And what do I mean by that? The guy had made the comment talking about, okay, well, let's take, why don't we, this is what he said. He said, why don't we understand that, you know, we have to get the meaning from English. We're English speakers. Why would we listen to something that was translated in you know, or used in Hebrew? You know, let's look at the English translation. And then if you're a linguist or a social scientist, you know that that's not even how you do things. Why is that not how you do things? Okay, first let's explain languages. Languages are set like they are living languages, like English, like we speaking now. There's a lot of people speak that all across the world. Then there are dead languages, which means that they still exist, but a lot of times they may be used they're used very seldomly. Certain, like, they can be called liturgical languages, where they're used in religious rites and ceremonies. These are languages like Hebrew, languages like that they say is not even spoken, right? But languages like Latin, Egyptian hieroglyphics. Nobody speaks that anymore, but somehow they've been able to loosely translate it, they claim. Languages like the old Viking language. And so you get an idea of what I'm saying. Those are called dead languages. Okay. And then you have extinct languages where there are no descendants, no communities that speak the language whatsoever. Okay. So the point being is that English only being around what, 14, 1500 years old respectively, it was brought in by some West Germanic tribes that went into Britain around the 5th century. All right. And it was called, or termed, Old English. Okay, so that language is still evolving, and it's a bastard language, which means it's eclectic. It takes from all other languages in order to create our understanding, all right, of life, and to make it simple. And so when you have to look up a word and it tells you to look up the etymology of words, which means the root meaning of words, so if you got to get to the root meaning, you have to consider that the language that it came from, in order to get a proper understanding of the concept that it was trying to relay to you. And how do we know that that's important? Because that's the difference a lot of times between factions. All right, is their interpretation of that body of knowledge, right? So you have what's called the Masoretic text, which was, published by some Masoret, the Masoretes, the Jews in the 7th to 10th centuries, okay? And it has become the official text for rabbinical Judaism. All right, and then so it's a part of the Tanakh, okay, and then so you have other texts that they use for clarification purposes and to compare that text to, like the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Greek Septuagint, all right, the Latin Vulgate, and so when you're dealing with that, like the Samaritan Pentateuch, for instance, there's a lot of textual differences from that in the Masoretic text. All right, so which accounts for what? A different interpretation. And think about that. If a text says he went up to the mountain versus it saying we went up to the mountain, you know how big of an argument that could cause? That's why I'm telling you that the root of their power is based on where what they can get a group of people to buy into. That's where these factions how they come about. That's why there's so many denominations of Christianity. Because of that very nature, in order to acquire power, if you want somebody to think the way that you think, you must change up the information. Okay, so when the brothers arguing about a point that shouldn't even be touched on, like, that's how they got down. That's why we got that behavior in us. That's why we want to, oh man, it said, he did, he went up, she went up, they went up. You be arguing about that all day because it's all based off a text that may or may not be respected by scholars. That's what you need to know. So it's a waste of time, man. We talking about real shit that's going on. And so, when you get brothers like that mislead the people, of course I'm gonna get upset. So I'm genuine in this. I'm transparent, man. I ain't about all of that. I'm about rocking with my people for real. Just like how, I was watching Crump TV, and that's my guy. I rock with Crump. And he had some brother on there, and then because of this recent turmoil between the United States and Iraq and Iran, the Middle East, and the brother was like, he started off just like these little things. It matters to me when people say this because it irks me. And he says, oh well, Israel is scared to go to war with Iran, or they don't have the military capability to go to war with Iran. I'm like, man, these niggas do not read, man. And I'm not trying to insult the brother, but I'm saying to myself, I'm like, look, dude, Israel went to war with 5 of the states in the Middle East at one time in 6 days. It was in 1967. It was called the 6-Day War. They killed almost 20,000 Arabs in 6 days, dude. They took the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt. They took Jerusalem, the West Bank, which would include East Jerusalem, from Jordan. They then took Golan Heights from Syria. All right, and they was at war with Iraq and Lebanon and decimated them all with American weapons. Okay, get your history right. These are boogeymen. This is political theater. First of all, you have to understand who Donald Trump is. Donald's name, look at his name. He's from a Scottish clan. The Scottish clan, the language that they used to use was Gaelic. The Scottish, well, they use Gaelic, and this might be one of those dead languages again, okay? Only used in religious rites and ceremonies. But Donald, or McDonald, translates into the son of Donald, and Donald in Gaelic means world ruler. Okay? That's what you need to know. Why is Donald Trump making these decisions on his own? His name means world ruler. Ain't that how he acting? You must know this. His family, the same family, like they talked about San Bernardino being a hut for Illuminati and secret societies, all that different type of stuff. That they come from the McDonald's is a Scottish name. Like if you hold that name and you a person of power, you're related to that family, and that family claims themselves to be world rulers. All right, that's why he posed with McDonald's foods and stuff, man. It's all in symbol. It's all in symbols, man. You must know that, signs and symbols. So when we were talking about, in the first video, because I'm gonna have to bring some people up to speed. I don't know if they were taking a listen or they listened to that video when we were talking about the nature of these individuals and how bestiality is legal in Washington D.C. and how we have bestiality going through a resurgence now, a renaissance, if you will, with Denmark legalizing bestiality in 1969. All right, and it was reporters, like I told you for in the first video, where she said that this guy in Denmark who owns a farm has, a farm of horses, and people come through in the busloads to have sex with these horses. All right. Matter of fact, just a couple quotes. It was, what's her name? Dr. Hanny Molesky. She wrote a book called Understanding Bestiality and Zoophilia. According to her, she said it was also aggressively rumored that Hitler's wife, Eva Braun, had sex with dogs for pleasure. Also, she said the spring fertility of Babylon, men and women would use dogs for multiple days in orgies, till the dog damn near died of exhaustion. You must know that. So you whipping and running around acting like this ain't real, man. They a cultural transmission. You should think of it respectively in terms of what is handed down generationally, more so than cross culturalization, which is between two groups of people with different values and different thought processes. You need to follow me on that, man. Just like how we was talking about, like there's brothers out there that I like, I check out every now and then because that platform is cool, simply because you can see them in the right direction, going in the right direction. Brothers like Mag Bitter Truth, shouts out to him. He be doing his thing, but some people be like, dang, he be going overboard with, everybody can't be a transition. What you got to understand, if you do your history, that was the nature. Like, for instance, you can go to the Smithsonian Archives and you can pull up a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Do you know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt wore dresses all up until he was 6 years old? They dressed him in dresses. Okay, he got the shoes on, the long hair, the dress, everything. All right, and let me bring her name up because most people need a European authority. All right, so we're going to get a European authority in this. All right, Joe B. Paoletti. She's a historian at the University of Maryland, author of the book Pink and Blue, Telling the Boys from the Girls in America. She said, quote unquote, she said, for centuries, boys wore and children wore dainty white dresses all up until the age of 6. For centuries. So when you see a movie in Hollywood and somebody says, oh, that's a boy playing a girl, or that's a man playing a woman, that's how it was historically. This is what they did for centuries. Mind you, she talked about how in her book, these were our new social conventions. These were social conventions that reigned supreme in the 19th century. So this idea that there's a gender bias and, where do we come up with this blue for boys and pink for girls? Those are, new thoughts that, begin to separate us down the line, which we already know nature has done that so much more better for us than what man and his societal constructs was ever able to achieve. But for the sake of argument, that's what they're saying. They're saying that used to be the case. Just like we told you before, what was the point before? Like if they had kangaroo courts, that's where the term kangaroo courts come from. But they already had animal courts. And these courts were mostly ecclesiastical courts or courts by the church. So they recognized not only through in a secular through a secular viewpoint, they also recognized it in their religious from a religious standpoint, that animals were equal to them. Animals had the same moral standard to them. So like I said before in the last video, if they knew that, why would they then have to feel some type of way when they were taking black men and black women supposedly and throwing them on boats and putting them in chains and dehumanizing them? They already knew what they were doing because they knew what you were. But in order to steal your story, they had to put you in a situation where you cannot maximally develop. That's the thing. So that's what I want people to understand. If this, I think this may run out, but I'm gonna make this a 2-part series, possibly even 3 parts. But I gotta keep going because it's much more that I want to say. So let's get it. I'll be back in a minute.